I would like to welcome onto the stage the moderator, Robert Mace, Executive Director of the Meadow Center at Texas State University.
Come on up. We'll get the panelists up here on the table. Nice little mask hanger here. My name's Robert Mace. I'm with the Meadow Center for Water and the Environment at Texas State University. And y'all can sit down. I'm going to make some opening comments, then I'll introduce y'all. We're a research institute of Texas State University, and mostly focused on, as our title suggests, water and the environment. Number of things we work on, but we're also working in the, we call it the one water space, kind of advanced, really kind of hyper water conservation, using the built environment as a source of water. And we heard earlier this morning about, trying to, net zero wasn't used, but like net zero energy, using buildings to generate energy. We can also use buildings to generate water, and so we're looking at that, as well as at the, some of the social aspects of how people interact with water and water conservation, and then also policy analysis on what policy impediments there are. Because the regulatory framework that we live in today, didn't envision the advances and the innovative things that we're doing today, and so there can be some regulatory impediments there. One of my favorite quotes is by the novelist James Michener, and he said, "Water, not oil, is the lifeblood of Texas," and quite frankly, water is the lifeblood of the world. Agriculture, energy, business, industry, municipalities, you name it, there's a strong water component to it. We have a growing population, so there's a greater demand for water, and we're also struggling, and will continue to struggle more and more with climate change. Just looking at the mega drought that's hitting the American Southwest, first time allocation demerits on the water from the Colorado River system. There's a lot of communities freaking out about where they're going to get their water from. And so using water more efficiently is going to become, and more smartly, is going to become critical as we go forward. Water is, and I think Bob alluded to this a little bit, that water is maybe a little behind on the energy side. There's been a lot of things going forward with technology, big data, with energy, and water's kind of coming up behind, but those tools are there, and there's very smart people, innovative people, and research that's occurring to tap into that potential. I went to a workshop a number of years ago, and it was about decentralizing water supplies, and there was somebody from a water utility there, and he said the water utility business has an unofficial slogan: "Me second." They don't want to be the first ones to do it. It's a very conservative business. But as innovative communities step forward, and San Antonio Water System is certainly one of those, employ this technology and be the me first, prove it up, then others follow once they see that it's a good thing to do, it saves water, and potentially even makes money, and hopefully does make money and saves money. I live in Austin, and my water meter is still old school. It's somebody has to come and flip the lid up and take a look at what the gauge reads. So there's still a lot of opportunity there. And then there's a lot to do on the user side, and we heard Bob talk about that, where. Like I'm part of a research study where they've added a device to our intake to our house that is measuring flow into our house on like a minute by minute basis, and I can see that data. They're collecting the data more kind of because they're studying us, so it's not terribly usable, but you can see those potential uses coming up. Sending you a note that gee, your use looks weird. You may have a broken pipe, or you've left the faucet on or something. I was able to use this system to detect my neighbor stealing water from our house. Now, he didn't perceive it as stealing, but I was like, I get an alert, it's like middle of the day, there's water's flowing at my house, and I'm thinking, there's no one there. And it seemed to happen every couple of weeks, and drove home when it was happening, and he was washing his car. And he was kind of just hooking up to my house. We have a central shut-off valve, which was very useful in Winter Storm Uri, and so we were able to kind of stop that from happening. And then there's lots of social aspects of interacting with people. There's the technology side, but then the meatware side, if you will, is critically important as well. So we've got this great panel to assemble to talk about these issues. We've got Dr. Keisuje Ikehata, and hopefully I've pronounced that correctly. Pretty good? Yeah. The longer I'm in Texas, the more I mispronounce words. The only word I can say is brisket, it seems, more and more. We've got Jose de la Cruz. He's the Director of Project Delivery at San Antonio Water System. And I should mention that Dr. K, which he's known for, he's also known for his hat. You should put that back on. He is Assistant Professor at Texas State University. You have met Bob Champagne over here on my far right. And then we've got Scott Williamson here. He is the founder and CEO of Capstone Metering. So I'm going to start off with Bob. Which categories of technology do you see generating the biggest source of innovation and value in the water sector?
Yeah, so sure. I just want to, if I could, circle back to a point that you made a second ago, which is, kind of implying that the water sector might be even a little bit behind. I saw a study around customer sat. I was from Gartner or JD Power or something, and said the most interesting finding they found this year was that the best are actually rivaling, and I think this goes for water, gas, electricity. The best companies out there, from a customer experience standpoint, are actually rivaling what you would see from an Uber or an Amazon. What's interesting now is that the gap between the best in class and what I call the worst in class, right, is widening dramatically. And so I think and we can talk about that as we go, but I think no matter which categories of technologies we're speaking of, our mission as technology companies and utilities is to find ways to let utilities apply, I guess is the best word, apply these technologies even amidst their legacy infrastructure, because that's the legacy IT infrastructure and physical infrastructure, because that's the only way we can continue to accelerate and grow. But from the standpoint of which categories, and maybe this will set up for some of the other perspectives, I think to me, there's a category around data capture, and I think that, I've been living around smart meter data for a long time. I think there's categories of sensors, set category. I mean, there's this whole aerial vehicle drone category. From the pictures from New Orleans, of the first pictures were from drones, of the transmission towers. So I think there's a lot we can do in the data capture space. I think the analytics space is fascinating. I think AI is not just a concept anymore. I mean, I think we're seeing real usable sources and bits of intelligence that we can repurpose across the business, as I mentioned. And then I think I don't think it's the functionality necessarily, the billing systems and things like that are advancing as fast. I think it is the orchestration platforms. I think when we look at DERMS in the utility sector, I think when we look at customer orchestration across water, gas, and electricity, it's the ability to put this ecosystem together in a way that creates a personalized experience and delivers on the outward stakeholders that haven't been users of our data and intelligence. So those would be the four that I would probably hinge on.
So you mentioned data acquisition, and Jose, I know that San Antonio Water System is, even during the pandemic, putting in an AMI, advanced metering infrastructure, which is of course critical. That's advancing from where I have at my house, which is one of those old school meters to something more complex. So tell us about what SAWS is doing there.
Yeah, so we're currently undergoing an implementation of an AMI system, and this is something that I think the water utility industry, does lag behind the energy, right? At least some of my counterparts across the country have told me, that they've thought about it, but have never really sort of taken that plunge, right, to go and do it. So we've got 560,000 customers that we hope to put on this system here over the next few years. And our primary goal was to enhance our customer experience, right? We go out and we read these meters manually each and every month. You just think about the logistics of that. It's just mind-boggling that we roll trucks each and every month to go and capture this one read. But on top of that, when a customer has an issue and they call us, that's really the only data point we really have to talk to them about, right? We're billing you this amount of money. We know that the water went through the meter, but this is the one thing that is really driving that. And so with this AMI system, we'll be capturing hourly reads. We've already started with 2,500 customers. We've started to see efficiencies internally, but also have started to see how we can proactively reach out to customers to notify them of leaks, to notify them of issues that they're probably having on their property. And that has been, I think, our biggest advantage so far. We'll go through the full implementation, and I think those numbers will grow exponentially. But yeah, in the middle of a pandemic, we didn't think we'd be doing it in the middle of a pandemic. We actually started before that. But it's been, one of those wonderful challenges that you get to work on this project that's going to impact so many people and do it in a positive way. And our leadership team is really sort of focusing in on how can we use that data to improve the customer experience. Our board is really thinking about that too. So over the next few years, I really see us advancing our customer options, our programs, and using this data to really drive a lot of that.
And even, again, I live in Austin, and even though Austin doesn't have that system yet, I signed up for, I think it's called Drop Counter, and it sends me an email every month after somebody's come and read the meter, and then tells me what my household use is, and then how I compare to other households. And I'm pretty convinced I watch every gallon in my house, and I'm pretty sure it is programmed such that you're never good enough. I feel like at some point it's like there's a dead guy over here that's using less water than you. So. Yeah. But even hearing your comment about the data and the infrastructure, with bigger cities that's easier to do, but that becomes more of a challenge with smaller communities. But there's still ways to kind of use the data that they do collect and try to leverage that into advancing water conservation or sharing information with their customers in terms of benchmarking them against somebody else. Scott, I have intersected a little bit with oil and gas companies, and that's kind of where I first was hearing about ESG, and I know you know a lot about ESG, but what does that mean for water utilities? Why should water utilities care about that?
First, to back up just a little bit because it ties into ESG, our number one thing that we have to improve is not the technology, not the data, but the actual utilities themselves to accept change.
Me second.
Me second. You said it, and it is something we've been dealing with for nearly 15 years of building some technology. We did a panel 8-9 years ago where we had systems where we could detect how much water, what time you use the restroom, and whether or not you washed your hands after you use the restroom at 3 a.m. in the morning. All of that technology has been here, but we haven't evolved into the next generation of utility management solutions because we're still working on 100-year-old technology even today. We're talking about top 10 utility, and they're just now beginning to evolve and use the first thing, and the customer experience is the first thing. For us, the customer experience is like 5 or 6 down the line. We tie in things to ESG now, as an example. For instance, the change in pressure on a daily basis for for the utilities that we have deployed is as many as 100 times in a day because of the power consumption and how their pumps are configured and when they're moving their water. We align all that to reduce their costs, reduce their carbon output, and bring those things to the table in a full package today, where the customer service aspect of that, especially for large utilities, and that is just now beginning to get there, whereas the smaller utilities they have to make those changes. We have a utility here in Texas, a city here in Texas, that either had the opportunity to completely dry up and or make a change. So they are incented to make a change no matter what the cost is because they lose their whole community. That ties into the ESG factor of what the socioeconomic impact of that environmental problem because of lack of management, not mismanagement, and then how that impacts the overall governance of that, which is governance for the health of the community now, not necessarily governance from Washington or all these other things. These cities and towns, SAWS is no different. They're forced with how do they draw an economic impact or a industry into the region if they can't support the water infrastructure needed. Again, goes back to what you said earlier. That is the number one asset that we have. It drives all other aspects of what we do here. So first we have to evolve the industry as a whole because we're so far behind in water. A lot of that is we're still working on 100-year-old technology, and we're advancing that technology to do the next thing, not the next 10 things. San Antonio, this impacts, y'all be 5 years rolling out a project. You'll be 10 years on that asset management at a minimum. You're still 15 years worth of the changes that you're making today, which are very good. We've advanced things to the next 5, 6, 7 stages that it'll be a while before, especially the major utilities, it will be awfully hard to catch up because the technology that you're putting in the field has limited sensor capacity compared to what you really need to pull data. Now, that doesn't mean that you aren't putting those in different areas and bringing them together. It will come up, but the smaller utilities are advancing much faster on some of that than the bigger ones.
Sure, and I think in a perfect world, right, we would want to sort of advance as fast as we could, right? I've worked in government for 14 years, and I don't think I've heard any government employee say, I don't want to advance that quickly, right? But there's a lot of barriers. Let's just be honest with that, right? Yeah. There are a lot of barriers, especially for the larger water utilities. And I think we do need to take some methodical steps in the right direction, which I think we are taking.
Yes.
And then sort of build upon that, right? And as you mentioned, the industry as a whole, I think, just needs to change too, and change with the times, right? And we've been reluctant to do that, right? So I think, all those factors considered, I've seen some of my counterparts, they're starting to undertake this type of technology as well, but also starting to think about how can we build upon this, right? But I can tell you, just having worked there for so long, there's a lot of barriers that are included in that.
Very much.
And I'm sure you know that as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just to chime in on that, I agree, Scott. It's a the cultural dynamic of a utility and the ability to. I heard someone use the word metabolize the technology inside of our organizations is a real barrier. I've actually been 20 years of a consultant. Andres probably knows this. I've been pretty angry at some of my clients because it's taken them so long. Now, having said that, I still have to, to some degree disagree with the kind of maybe the blanket statement, because I think one of the things we've seen with technology is that the company, in years of benchmarking, right? One of the things that's fascinated me is if you scanned 100 companies, there would not be one company who is best at everything. Not even close, right? In fact, I think when we measured this, it was like maybe one company is best in 20% of the areas, or even in the top quartile in 20% of the areas, which means everybody, even the leaders, even the Duke Energies of the world, right, who used to be the icon, they inherently are not going to haven't progressed 80% of their business. So I think the key for us is to almost componentize our technology in a way that can be embraced and metabolized in bite-sized pieces, right? You may not be able to go out and give customers granular, load disaggregated, tell them how much they're using in their shower or how much they're using in their toilet or how much they're using in their pool, but you do have the ability to put a usage profile out there. Or you do have ability to take a notification and send them a notification if there's a boil advice. I mean, it's simple. Start simple, baby steps, and that kind of is like a snowball effect in the rest of the technology ecosystem. So I think it really is our ability to embrace bite-sized pieces of the technology and set up our environments to be able to help utilities consume that.
So with technology and technological advances, somebody has to come up with those. Dr. K, and I know you've got a very varied background, and that's maybe a little unusual for a professor, but certainly helpful. Where do you see the role of academia and research in supporting what we've been talking about in terms of advancing data acquisition and technology with water infrastructure? Yeah, get close. Yeah, they've all been sanitized. So.
Well, my research area really is water quality and water treatment, and data collection and management is really not my cup of tea. But I can speak that I still have a research project on developing new sensor technologies to enable more cost-effective water treatment, more safe, water reuse type of processes. So that's one of the things that academia can do to the industry and providing newer tools so that we can, well, of course you guys have too much data to handle now, but we can give you more data to make it more
Is that one dead?
interesting. And we also have research project initiative to really analyze the big data using data analytics. Again, it's not my cup of tea, so I have to work with other professors in different colleges, McCoy Business, and other engineering professors. But we are actively trying to utilize some more academic data analytics techniques to solve some real world problems. But I think what we want to do is talk to the industry, the utilities more, because we need data. We can't just come up with or make up some data. So I think close communication with the utilities like San Antonio Water Systems and get some data, tell us what you want to know, and we'll figure it out for you. So I think that's another thing we can do.
And researchers, I think, also can help with this me second issue of because water providers can be pretty suspicious, I guess, of vendors, because you guys have solutions to all the solutions in the world, but having a third party, independent party come in and develop maybe the data, look at it, and then come back and go, yeah, this is what the data shows, here's our analysis, and it's, it's working at this level,
right.
To help communities, a broader array of communities consider the technology.
Yes, let me kind of follow up on that, because I used to be working for a consulting company for 8 years in California. I moved here 2 years ago. I quit the job and bye-bye to consulting and come back to academia. One thing I really like about being academics is I can be a crazy scientist or crazy doctor or something. So if I were the consultant representing my client, it would be kind of hard to do. More conservative, me second is, I'm very familiar with that things. But academic, we have to be the first. I don't want to be the second, I don't want to be the third. So let me do it first, and you guys can follow that for you. So.
I'm glad you mentioned wastewater because We've been talking about like communicating information maybe from a utility out to the customers, but there's also a need to communicate information within the utility. And I know I've heard stories with saws where, you know, the water conservation folks are pushing really hard to you know, lower water use as much as possible, use it as efficiently as possible. But then on the downstream side, you've got the folks that are treating that wastewater and then marketing that water. And they're just like, man, it keeps going down. You know, our input's going down. Yeah. What's the projection going forward on this? What can we plan for? So I think that's good. I see somebody. Well, go ahead.
I got to say, it's been 2 years, and this microphone was just talking to me. I had to.
Don't sing. Please don't sing.
I love it. No, actually, Bob, like, you lit me up. And then you're talking about Texas State. Man, I've been just thrilled. So I'm Andrew Gardner with Reach Technologies. We're a data analytics firm. We started out of COVID, and, you know, yeah. And a Cedar member, and love Cedar. So having a great time. And what I loved, you talked about the infrastructure side as being, you know, you're 5, 10, 15 years out on these projects, planning and implementation. And yet we're moving to this agile world. And yet we have this perception, I hear in you guys, in the sorry, not patient side, because I come from a background in healthcare, this perception of value of the tech geek that wants to sit there monitoring every time they flush the toilet, right? And I saw the same thing 10 years ago at everybody at South by Southwest with every smart app, and they were going to quantitative self themselves out of diabetes entirely. And then you go to rural Mississippi and you're like, okay, how many of these people are going to want to monitor every single drop and drip that comes out of that? Mm-hmm. And it really gets down to segmentation and understanding the specific consumer demographics, understanding what they want, what they value. And come back to the COVID side, what we found in Dallas and in Houston was we were able to have a big impact by understanding these segmentations geospatially. And so that's my plug for Texas State, is you guys have in this place one of the top geospatial groups in the country, like right here. And thinking about those segments geospatially and then contextually to their situation. So everything's fine right now, you know, and I'm thinking economically, I'm thinking about savings. And then the summer hits and we're running the AC through the roof and bill goes up and it's all magical, right? It's all magical. Why the heck have you guys done this to me? I was one of those angry consumers on the water side. That's why I moved out of Austin. That's why I moved out to New Braunfels. It became my own utility.
Me too.
Got my septic in and got my well in, and I learned, water doesn't just magically come out of the ground when you want it as much as you want forever. And my perception of value shifted dramatically to that situation. Even now on a well, I'm going, man, I wish I could pay $20 a month to somebody to just help me monitor and optimize how I'm using my well and make sure that I'm doing this right. Because when you don't have water, there's no, out of your well, there's nobody you can go yell at. And it's easy just to go yell at you guys. But on the agile side, your projects are so big, and sometimes, consumer satisfaction is treated as this little bubble off to the side, but that is your leading edge. That's your opportunity to start engaging with the value perception of that consumer. Maybe they would dial back their consumption or increase their consumption if their perception of value in that segment, in that area, in that context was increased. And so your opportunities to save, drive behaviors is everything contextualized to them. Even on the output, on the treatment side, I was the only high schooler to waste time at the water reclamation plant in Reno, Nevada, where I grew up. I was a weirdo to hang out there. But on the pharmaceutical side, understanding, pharmaceutical consumption in your area, what's ending up in your water, why it's ending up in your water, and changing behavior about people dumping their drugs into the toilet, There's plenty of stories on that, but it all does come back to steering your ship, not just from how do I get the most money out of these people, that's part of the story, but how do I optimize the perception of value among my consumers, in the situation, because my perception of value changed a lot when it started to snow, right? And on energy, on water, and everything. And so it changed a lot when it's super hot, changes a lot when we run out of water. Changed a lot when I get a $1,000 bill for my, because I got some little leaky drippy drip thing in the backyard. But anyhow, it's interesting to see how all of that shifts how much you can change behavior and how much you actually have to put into infrastructure. And it gets back, making again my cedar plug here, to the opportunity to understand those consumer segmentations in geospatial context and then situational in their situational perception of value. So I don't know, I was jazzed about your stuff and wanted to just put that out there.
Yeah, I really resonate and hold dear the concept of value. Sid Seshdiva, my CEO when I was at Innowatts, really drilled that in us. There were, at the time, there were lots of companies, right? There was Bidgely, there was Opower, and all of them were talking about how to create granular data and send it to customers. And I remember Sid distinctly saying to us and our investors, that's not value, right? What value is if I can use that to create a better energy forecast and go save 10% on my power purchases. That's value. Could I use that same forecast to maybe do something different when we were in Hurricane Harvey or Hurricane Ida or in this particular freeze you guys had a few years ago? So I think it all comes back to our ability to look at some piece of the data analytics technology ecosystem and say, all right, think of it almost from an academic applied research standpoint, right? Where can we apply this in different pockets of our business to create value and and democratize the technology? When I heard Sioux Falls executive smart cities talk about he used the word metabolizing data and metabolizing technology. It doesn't matter if you're a water company or a city or a utility. If you can't, you can't break it up into pieces that you can consume, then you're kind of fooling yourself. So.
Before I go to the floor,
I want to add to that, but I also want to break it down a little farther. We're in a room full of technology that's electric. We're talking about water. The number one problem that we deal with in water in San Antonio is an anomaly. But I'll give you a great example of the value of water to most utilities. They still lose somewhere between 30 and 40%. I don't care what they write or send in. We had a city that was losing 70%. That all being said, one of the two largest municipal districts in North Texas that eliminates 99% of them, you can figure out 50% which one it was, had their main line, one of their 80-inch main lines drilled through and cracked, and it ran for over 30 days before they decided they wanted to fix it. The millions and millions of dollars of water was not an economic impact. It wasn't a socio-economic impact. It wasn't a governance impact enough to make a difference. We have to restructure and take this thing to a natural capital point of view from the standpoint of water. Energy becomes really important in Texas right after the second hour of you not having electricity for your AC. You are lit up, and a number of people who complain because your distribution system had a problem or the distribution system had a problem is completely different than dealing with someone who, okay, we've got some water storage and there's water storage, we've got these things, but there's not enough emphasis to understand that that is a finite tool and a finite resource, and we don't have it structured right from the capital or the management point of view of the value of it. So all of this goes to waste. That's the number one thing that we structure and try to get through that process. And I will say, we've known SAWS and worked with SAWS for a number of years. That's a critical infrastructure thing to you guys, because 20 years ago, the aquifer that you are dealing with is limited, and you couldn't see growth coming if you didn't manage it.
Right.
You are one of a few that understand the economics of that, because the socio-economic impact of the ESG side of that thing is you can't bring industry in.
Yeah, Texas, for the state as a whole, the water loss, I want to say it's about 17%. But there's some communities that put in 100 gallons and get 120 out, so we've got to study those in more detail.
Yes.
That's a joke about the data quality. I mean, that's for real. But there are, particularly in the smaller community side, 70, 80% line loss in the delivery. Just a quick question for Jose. related to the line of questioning is how SAW's planning to use AMI data with its customers? Is there any segmentation? Is it how are you going to roll that out?
Yeah, so I mean, we're doing our pilot right now. It's 2,500 customers, and we picked 3 parts of the city, 3 very different parts of the city. Kind of did that on purpose just to see what our customer response would be during this pilot, and we've reached out to them several times, and I mean, we've gotten very different responses in how they want the technology to be used and how they want their data to be used. And so we go from not at all, I don't want the system, I don't want my data being captured or used, to, yeah, I want you to tell me when I have a leak, I want you to tell me when a high bill is coming, to, I want you to send me stuff every single day because I just want to, absorb that data. So we're trying to figure out right now sort of where's that Goldilocks approach, right? Where's that sort of happy medium, and how do we make everyone happy? So we won't make everyone happy, but how do we get a large portion of our customer base to buy into this? So,
I think the key is ultimately, how do you not make everybody happy? How do you personalize it to where,
right.
And the data will help you personalize it. I just want to say, I don't disagree with you at all, Scott. I mean, I think the value, there's enormous value in waste at an infrastructure level, and I think there's also enormous waste at a consumer level, at a customer level. And we're seeing that in our water companies, our water clients in California, right? The ability to see things in the meter, the ability to see things in the behavioral patterns of customers opens up a whole, possibility to save water. It just happens to be, in energy, it's the same environment or same goal we're pursuing, I guess.
There are some utilities in California that will look at your property and then you have your rate structure for your property based on your use profile, and then using remote sensing to see how much turf you have and what you should be using efficiently.
We send our app sends violations out all the time. Now, it depends on how much the utility wants to do that, and it depends on what kind of customer you're communicating with. So it does all come back to personalization. But it in the end, I agree with Scott. It's all about the value in the water space is all about how do we save water and how do we avoid waste. I mean, it's a good point.
Very interesting discussions, guys. But as we develop and then implement these smart technologies in water utilities, other utilities, what are some of your ideas on where are we going to be vulnerable? Where will inequalities manifest? And what should we be looking for on the flip side of all of this?
Vulnerability, from my standpoint, from where we see it, first off, from the technology or the implementation of new technologies, starts with the end user. It's ironic. We just are releasing technologies that detect backflow, which is a #1 volatility for contamination getting into the system. It isn't from someone throwing tabs over into the lake, figuring out that that's going to pollute the whole system and poison everyone in the system, because that lake processes that water and there's technology to catch it. But every fire hydrant, every house, all you have to do is increase the water pressure by 10 PSI, and whatever you want to pump back into that system can be pumped back in undetected at every household. So the vulnerabilities come first from there. We're going to talk about cybersecurity before this is done, and can you equip a device to be secure? The technologies that we build are designed around being VPN encrypted, IP networks, so that it's just as secure as anything that you walk around with your laptop on. Our vulnerability that we see time after time after time is not from the technology, but from the personnel running the district or running the operation. The quickest way to have the vulnerability is someone doesn't understand the value of their password and their system being set open. We have several utilities, even some of the larger ones don't realize that having a IP jack or a cable jack plugged in or available to be plugged in, and you walk up and plug into it, a hacker can get in so quickly just from an Ethernet connection much less anything else, just walking into a building in most cases. So it still goes back to, from my standpoint, from what we see, that vulnerability being still at a human level of the people who are holding the data or managing that cloud, and they don't see the value of it. I had a city send us, as a great example, their customer list via email, and it had every freaking social security number of every customer in that town. We have to start with the people training first. I can build all the technology in the world. I can't combat that. So we have to see that vulnerability and see that as one of the things that we have to build towards. But that's a great example. I mean, training a person in the billing department not to send us something that is, it's like, come on. That happens day after. It's not as frequent as it was 4 or 5 years ago, but it's still there. We have gotten better. That's my take on that.
And that brings, I mean, it even brings you from a vulnerability standpoint into the whole data governance conversation. I mean, you know, for us, and just to kind of hinge on the smart meter data, right? You know, a lot of the way we govern data, because we use a lot of data movement in the cloud. I mean, it comes back to what do you need to perform the analytics or the action that you're going to execute, right? If it's a matter of disaggregating your water load into certain kind of appliances, I don't need much other than whether I need your location, I need your zip code. I don't even need your house location. I certainly don't need your any PII data. Or, you know, so it really is up to, in this big ecosystem, this circular economy, as I called it, I think it depends, the whole data governance conversation is going to become much more important.
I'm sorry, sir, question time is over. I'm joking, go ahead.
I know. So, quick question. So many things we're doing at Cedar, it's really trying to break the glass ceiling on many things. Some of those have to do with, reusing water better, getting to a stage of near zero water or something like that. The notion of reusing wastewater and turn it into drinking water. Can you guys address any of this in terms of where do you see, or do you have any examples? Do you see any communities thriving or trying to achieve, true, really, efficiencies and what technologies are being thought of or needed, or maybe desalination, or what are we thinking about solving the water challenges that we have and how much we waste?
I think I will first. Well, portable reuse of wastewater has been practiced for decades back in Orange County, California, LA, and they have been doing this for a long time using highly advanced treatment processes, reverse osmosis, UV, advanced oxidation processes. So the technology is already there. We can drink wastewater, we can drink rainwater, we can drink surface water, any water. My lab, come to my lab, I can make any water drinkable. The question is economy. How can we make it economical? Because that's the most important part. Seawater desalination is the worst approach because it has high concentration of salts in it. So to push the water against its osmotic pressure using membrane costs you a lot of money, $3,000 per acre foot or something, as opposed to reusing wastewater, which has 30 times less salinity than the seawater. So technically speaking, we can make the wastewater reuse 30 times, well, I shouldn't say that, but at least half of the cost of seawater desalination. There are a lot of other factors like customer acceptance, public acceptance, and so on. But I think the most important part of the hardest part of this portable reuse wastewater treatment is that the technology is there, but how can we make sure that 24 hours a day, 365 days a week, days a year, the water is 100% safe. If we want to drink our wastewater, we have to make sure that quality. And to make sure the quality, we have a lot of technology to do that, but it's not quite, it costs a lot of money to test all parameters every single day or every week. And that's where my lab and other people who are trying to develop online sensors to measure the critical water quality parameters, pathogens, chemical toxins, so that we know that 100% our treated water is safe. Again, we can drink any water, seawater, brackish water. South is doing a great job desalinating their brackish groundwater, and they're doing it every single day. So
Fascinating, Dr. K. I was wondering if we'll ever get to the point with water that we're at with energy, where people say, I want this much renewables and I want this much, fossil fuels. Maybe we give them a choice between wastewater and, no, I'm kidding. But
Well, the wastewater, there's 3 major watersheds that feed from North Texas to South Texas. The wastewater is being distributed every day from most all utilities into the tributaries or into those watersheds. Houston bears the brunt of that from the standpoint that most of their water is some form of treated water that they retreat, that's a released wastewater from North Texas. So that's a normal thing that we certainly are working on that is already existing. The key is, how do we take things? Another example would be even the power generation plants that use water and put it back in. Heating up the water creates just about as much problem as dealing with the wastewater coming from a treatment plant, and that the hotter the water gets, the more nutrients that you have, the more nutrients that you get into, the more things you get into that'll kill you, that go undetected as you pull water out of a river or out of a lake. So that portion of the fossil fuels thing and everything that we do, fossil and nuclear for that matter, deal with how we treat those elements. There's technologies that are coming online to read those in real time today. We have a technology that we just licensed that takes the microbial level and reads it in a real-time scenario now for us to have that data, not only what's happening before it hits the plant for wastewater, but after it leaves the treatment plant and before it gets into the next plant downriver or in that watershed, to be able to say, this hasn't been contaminated farther, it needs this kind of treatment going in.
Yes.
That's all online coming, and those are the new IoT or new industrial technologies that are very inexpensive today. Desalination is going to be a while before, to your point, it gets to a point where we can afford it, or we bring the cost of water up in alignment to what it should be for its value. That's been proven in the Middle East already, because you can live in the Middle East and drink 90% of your water is desalinated, but you're paying a good price for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, about 50% of the flow from or in the Trinity River that feeds down into Houston under normal conditions is treated wastewater from Dallas-Fort Worth, and during droughts it's upwards of 80%. Yep. And then direct potable reuse, Texas has the first, the first plant in the United States, the second in the world out in Big Spring. So it's water coming straight from the wastewater treatment plant. I've toured that plant, and the fellow that operates that system, he shows me kind of the water that comes out of the wastewater treatment plant. He goes, I start the tour here, I don't start it over there.
The funny thing is, he asks you to drink it when you get to the other end.
Yes, and I did. I mean, it had a slight hint of beef enchiladas, but other than that, it was that's a joke. That's a joke. Water was perfectly clean. El Paso's building a big direct potable reuse plant. There's one going in Travis County, because it was more affordable to treat and distribute that water than to do a land application, since they're not allowed to do surface.
Decentralized, because everything talks about either centralized or decentralized. We're beginning to do that already with oil and gas facilities across the U.S. where we decentralize the water treatment and or the water pumping treatment for fresh water and retreatment for the wastewater, and we blend that back in a decentralized world now. Those technologies are here. We're doing those in package plants.
And in Austin, the city has built a new building where they have a skid-based wastewater treatment plant. So it recycles the wastewater coming out of the building and then brings it back into the building, the flush toilets. And then they also have, and I love it, it's a delicious term called sewer mining. And so if you need water and you're next to a main sewer line, you can then divert that sewage, treat it to get water for your local purpose.
There's some things we might want to actually not inform and educate customers about.
Scratch that.
That's the Water and Sewer Convention. It's next month.
Sorry, the microphone's breaking up. Can I go a little over? I've got like one question, and then I kind of want to give everybody 1 minute to wrap up. Will that be okay? Dr. K?
Sure.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Maybe you already talked about this, but maybe is there, like, you talked about water heating. Does the water utility work with other energy production, like oil and gas, I think you just mentioned, or electric energy production, to combine efforts? So some of their wasted heat energy can be actually used for water purification. Maybe if you can talk about that, that would be great.
The brief answer is yes. The different regional water agencies work for the release of water from their dams all the way up from Possum Kingdom Lake all the way to Dow Chemical in Houston, Texas. That's all just part of the ecosystem. The question is, that water, when it gets there, how do they reuse that through Dow Chemical internally? A lot of things are being done on the industrial side along with the commercial side to take that, try to reuse it, reprocess it, and then re-release it. We've been working on a number of things that get into things like how to monitor where we know we don't create algae plumes in the Gulf of Mexico because all of these nutrients and the heat and everything else artificially begins to breed algae plumes. That's all here. It's not on a wide scale, but it's here, it's coming, and it's beginning to be implemented across, especially the U.S.
Jose, do you want to say something?
I think that's probably a little bit outside of my area, but I mean,
Okay.
I know we do some work with our local energy.
Yeah, I
utilities.
think if I remember correctly, y'all take kind of waste products from your wastewater treatment plant that have been dried up and then are burned to create energy.
Methane,
Yeah.
Yeah, I know at SARS wastewater treatment plant, you guys have anaerobic digestion and energy recovery, as well as solar panel, and they're generating energy from off that solar panel, and they actually, you guys probably send the power to the grid instead of using the power at
we
their
do, right.
plant.
So we work with our sister utility, CPS Energy, to do some of that, yeah.
There are a lot of energy water nexus.
Synergies there, yeah.
So I want to ask one last question, 1 minute apiece. And the question is quite simply, what's next? And it could be from perspective of the utility, your company, research, or it could be a broader answer related to water and technology. So we'll start with Bob. What's next?
I'll come back to where I ended the opening remarks, and I think we need to think about our technology and our data and every part of the technology ecosystem, not from within the four walls of our utility, but across you talked about your sister utility, right? Across between the nexus of water and energy. But I think there's a much wider ecosystem of, if we really want to save energy, save water, then there's just such a wide array of stakeholders, and our ability to educate, engage, empower those stakeholders with our data and our technology and make our technology available to those stakeholders is probably the biggest. I would say it's a challenge, but it's also what should be what's next on our radar.
Dr. K, what's next?
To me, I kind of like to follow up on what Andres said. Zero liquid discharge in water is a big issue, especially in inland communities, Central Texas or farther inland. There's no way for us to dispose of the desalination reverse osmosis concentrate, which we call brine stream, cost effectively. Well, there are many ways, but that's one of the drawbacks of reverse osmosis-based desalination water reuse scheme. What we really want to look at is to eliminate the need of brine disposal by using various technologies, and so that we can make safe portable reuse or desalination more to everybody, not the largest and richest people. I like to make this possible for everybody in the country.
Wonderful. Scott, what's next?
Technology is here, it's coming to mainstream. That's first. Ingesting the data, which we're already doing, but the outcome of that data or the actionable insights that are coming are really exciting. I mean, that's what we see. We have data that we don't even know what that data represents yet, even in our own technology that we built. That's the kind of technologies that are going to drive the future. It's hard to say how it's going to look like, but it's nothing that we see today. I will say that. It's a whole new world coming.
Very good. Jose, what's next?
So I think for us at the utility, I mean, what's next is really just getting ready for all this transformation, right? It's a big leap forward for us, right? Going from manual to digital. And I think for our employees, for our customers, I mean, that's something that we've got to be better prepared for. I will say it's a fascinating panel, right? And when I leave here, I hope that Scott and Bob and Dr. K, I can hear some more about your ideas about how we can continue to innovate in a much more maybe rapid way than what we're doing today, right? Because I think our customers will expect that at some point. And so I think for us, it's getting into that mindset of this is not just one project or program that we have to do, but it's really a launching pad to so many other things that we need to do for our customers. So.
Okay, well, fantastic comments, because that does kind of tie everything that the future is going to be, working with research, applied research, working with private companies and public-private partnerships, and obviously working with the utilities, and at the end of the day with the customers. So please join me in thanking this panel, and thank you all for your attention.